ever since I knew that I would be doing this lesson, I've been thinking of what I can possibly talk about that I feel most people, especially young people, can relate to. Um, Lately, or I can say for the past few months, I kind of faced different challenges in my life. And at some moment, I was feeling like this is the worst life can get, or it was basically I would say, the most horrible time in my life. And it is in those times where you kind of get a different perspective in life, or you look at life differently. And you start looking outside, and you start looking at different people, and you see that other people are happy, and it will kind of seem unfair that why are there other people happy and you're not happy? Then you tend to compare yourself. So then I thought, okay, what can I speak about tonight that I feel it can relate to me and also to many young people? And picked the topic, the source of life. And Uncle D kind of introduced the topic this morning. Most of what he touched on was what my lesson is also going to touch on. And it is basically uh, we find ourselves looking for, like Uncle D said, physical solutions for our spiritual problems. And that is the reason why today we are kind of breaking down, or today we are falling apart. And it is the reason why today we are faced with many challenges that we feel we cannot overcome. So we are living in a world where if we look around, many people are suffering, many people are going through different problems, but we are kind of blinded to it because we then focus too much on our own problems and what's going on in our lives, and we tend to miss the pain that other people are going through. And as soon as you step out of this place, there are as many problems as the different faces you see. But often we do not see that. We do not see what other people are going through because we are focused so much on what we are going through. And you kind of ask yourself that why are we suffering if we have the Bible? It's a question that I also had to ask myself, that why am I going through this if they say that we came into this life with an instruction manual? It's like when you buy any new product, when you buy a car, for example, when you buy a DVD, all of them always come with an operational manual or an instruction book, which many of us, of course, don't read. And therefore, we underutilize the product or we underutilize whatever it is. And in another way, we can say we abuse the product. Um, you find that you have bought a DVD that maybe has 15 functions and you only use three, which is play, rewind, and pause, or something like that. And also, this instruction manual comes with the, let's say, the defaults. If this product that is not working as it should be, what you need to do. And often we kind of miss that. And if it is something that we value, we will actually take it back to the creators of it. If it's, let's say, Mercedes-Benz, you won't take a Mercedes-Benz to Toyota, you'll take it back to Mercedes-Benz because those are the people who created it. Those are the people who know how the product functions. Often in our lives also, instead of us going back to the instruction manual, we tend to run to people. We run to things that we feel, or places that we feel we're going to get solutions. And that is the reason why we are breaking apart today. That is the reason why we are falling, because we are looking for physical solutions. And most of the problems that we're facing today are not actually physical problems, it's spiritual problems. That is why when we go through pain, you don't feel the pain in your skin or in any part of your body, but yet you feel the pain in your heart. And you can ask yourself, why is it that it's your heart and mind that suffers? It is because we are not faced with the physical problem, which is your flesh. We are dealing with spiritual problems. And most of the times we do not consult God, or we do not consult the one who made us, the one who has the solutions to our problems. We are quick to run to different people in the hope or in the pursuit of solutions to our problems. So I had to ask myself the questions that why do we face these difficulties? And when we face these difficulties, who do we run to or who do we turn to? And most of the times we trust people to come up with solutions to our problems. And most of the times, the last person we run to is God, because people that we trusted could solve our problems could not solve them. And by the time we run back to God, we find that we have suffered so much. We have suffered to the point where it was unnecessary for us to go through that. But, looking at the good side of that kind of suffering or the pain, there is so much positive in it. Uh, and, talking about pain and talking about us suffering, it doesn't matter who we are, it doesn't matter how much money you have or which family you come from or whatever book you're holding. You could be holding the Bible, yet we are still suffering. People are holding the Quran or whatever material they're holding, yet they are still suffering. But then it comes down to how do we then face or deal with that suffering that we're going through. And it made me look at the book of Psalms. If we read Psalms 46, verse 1, and also 10, 46 verse 1 will say to us that God is our refuge and strength, always ready to help us in times of trouble. And verse 10 says to us that be still and know that and know that I am God. Often we forget these words, we forget these promises of God. These are not just empty words, they are actually promises. And we know that we serve, or we believe that we serve a God who never goes back on his word, a God who stands by his promise, a God who will never change his mind when he says he will do something. So if we have faith, we need to trust in him, and we need to often forget what the world expects of us or what the world says we need to do when we face different things or when we face different problems. We need to then go back or look back at who is our source of life, who is the person that will be or that will give us the best solutions when it comes to the problems that we're facing. As young people today, I've come across a lot of young people who are suffering or who are going through so much pain. And I had to ask myself that why is it that we as young people are suffering in this world? And why is it that young people have given up when there's so much they can look forward to as young people? Young people have given up to a point where they have to turn to drugs, they have to turn to different sorts of things that will make them forget of what their problems or that will make them forget um, the challenges that they're going through. But at the end of the day, those are not permanent solutions. Those are temporary solutions. Because when you sober up, you still have to face whatever problem that you are going through. But yet, we do not learn from that. We still run back and face those and go back to those things that we feel make us feel better or give us immediate satisfaction. And, one thing that the Bible always tells us is that our sins, our pains, our hurting, and our suffering was lifted up at the cross of Calvary. But then if it is true that all these things, Jesus took them when he was at the cross, why then do we still suffer? Why do we still then suffer from all these things that we are told that Jesus took at Calvary? Why are we faced with anxieties? Why are we faced with pain? And it is a question that if one had to think clearly or one had to sit down and kind of evaluate our lifestyle and also our lives in a whole, we will find that the reason why we still face these things, even though we are told that God, or even though we believe that God took all those things at the cross, it is because we have not given God complete control of our lives. We are sometimes convinced, or we convince ourselves and say we have given God complete control of our lives, but yet there are still certain aspects of our lives that we have the desire to control. And now when we end up facing all this hurt and anxieties, and those are all coming up because of these desires of us to take control of whatever situation that we're going through. It was something that I felt also I had to learn hard. You get exposed to people who are going through different problems in life, and because you love those people, your desire is for you to kind of turn the situation around or to be there to help them go through whatever situation that they're going through. And you then forget that you can only do what you can, and the rest you need to leave up to God. So in the midst of you trying to be in control of people's situation, you then forget that God says, "Leave it all up to me." And probably whatever challenges that those people are facing, it is by God's will for a certain reason. And therefore, we need to accept that we can only do up to a certain point, and the rest we need to leave to God to control. Because most often, if you had to evaluate most of the things that you stress about, it is because you are not in control of those situations. It is because you cannot change the situation. And then you would ask yourself, why do we waste then time sitting worrying about those things? Why do we waste time being depressed over those situations while we can just leave it up to God and say, God, if it is your will, then this is how far I can go. The rest, we leave it up to God to take control, because we, in the midst of all these situations, we find ourselves trying to play God in these situations, trying to take up people's problems and change them ourselves. And therefore, we end up having anxieties. We end up being depressed. We end up breaking down because we cannot change the situation. We are not in control of the situation, and our desire is to be in control of that situation. If we read Isaiah 43, verse 1, Isaiah 43, verse 1 to 2, it says, "But now, O Jacob, listen to the Lord who created you. O Israel, the one who formed you says, do not be afraid, for I have ransomed you. I have called you by name. You are mine. When you go through deep waters, I will be with you. When you go through rivers of difficulty, you will not drown. When you walk through the fire of oppression, you will not be burned up. The flames will not consume you, for I am the Lord your God." If we can just remember what God tells us here, that He does not say are not going to face all these challenges or all these troubles that we are facing today. He tells us that when we do face these things, He will always be there with us. Because I can say that most of our problems or most of the situations we find ourselves in, it is not surprising to God, or God is not surprised when we are facing with those challenges, because if He is the one who created us, it means that He knows, or He already knew the challenges that we will face when we are on this earth. So with Him knowing, it means that He has everything that He knows that we need to go through those challenges. But often we forget that when we go through all these challenges, the person that we need to consult is God. When we face different sicknesses, the person that we need to consult is God, because the doctor himself will not be able to heal you, but it is God who can heal you, because the doctor can only do what he can to heal or to save your life, but God can has the ability to change your situation or to heal you. And also, if we look at the book of Jeremiah, Jeremiah 2, verse 13. Jeremiah 2, verse 13, basically, what it says to us, this is God. I think this was actually Jeremiah asking God, or responding to the situation that they were facing. He asked God that, has the Lord abandoned Jerusalem? And people ask, this is the question that Jeremiah was asking, that why is there no healing for my people? Why has God forsaken these people? Why are they hurting? And why are they going through all these challenges? And I feel the same situation is still relevant to us, or is the same things that we go through. We often, when we face these situations, we often ask all these questions, that why are we going through these things? Has God left our lives? Has God abandoned us? And the answer to that question, I would say, no, God has not abandoned us. And here we can see when Jeremiah also asked that, is there no healing for the wound of my people? The answer to that, I'm sure Jesus or God would say that there is healing, is that people were looking at the wrong places for that healing. People were looking at the wrong places for the answers to their questions. So it is the same thing with us in life. When we face challenges, when we go through all these different things, we we often tend to forget the source of our lives, the one who has created us, the one who knows what it is that we need to do when we face different situations, the one who holds the power or the courage or the strength that we need to overcome these situations. That is why today we are suffering. That is why today we are faced with challenges that we feel we are not in control of or that we feel are ending our lives. It is because we are looking to different places or different people for solutions that only God has. And this is something that also angers God, because he expects us to come to him when we face these things. He expects us to come to him for solutions because he's the one that knows us. He's the one that has given us life. But yet we run to different things. We tend to then worship people, or we tend to expect people to have solutions to our problem. And then we end up having all these things that we are focusing on here tonight. And also in Jeremiah 18:22, we will see that Jerus- uh, Jeremiah actually asked that, has the Lord abandoned Jerusalem? People were asking this question. And it is often the question that we also ask. Has God abandoned us? Why are we going through this? Why is God allowing this situation in our life? And it is often the questions that we cannot answer by ourselves. And the only answer we can find is if we go back to the one who has created us and the one who has made us. And this made me think basically of the story of Job. If you read Job chapter 1, verse 9 to 22, and also Job chapter 2, verse 1 to 10, this was when Job was facing these challenges or two trials that God had placed or allowed into his life. If we can just quickly read from in Job chapter 1, verse 9, this was a conversation between God, Satan, and Satan was saying to God that, yes, Job has a good reason to fear God. You have always put a wall of protection around him and his home and his property. You have made him prosper in everything that he does. Look how rich he is. But reach out and take away everything he has, and he will surely curse you to your face. And then verse 12 says, all right, you may test him, the Lord said to Satan. Do whatever you want with everything he possesses, but don't harm him physically. So Satan left the presence of God. One day when Job's son and daughter were feasting at the older brother's house, the messenger arrived at Job's home with the news. Your oxen were plowing and the donkey feeding beside them. When the Sabeans raided us, they stole all the animals and killed all the farm hands. I am the only one who escaped to tell you. While he was still speaking, another messenger arrived with the news. The fire of God has fallen from heaven and burned up your sheep and your shepherds. I am the only one who escaped to tell you this. While he was still speaking, the third messenger arrived with the news. Three, three bands of Chaldean raided, has stolen your camels and killed your servants. I am the only one who escaped to tell you. While he was still speaking, another messenger arrived. Your son and daughter were feasting at their elder brother's house. Suddenly, the powerful wind swept inside. The house collapsed, and your children are dead. I am the only one who escaped to tell you this. Job stood up and tore his robe in grief. Then he shaved his head and fell to the ground and worshipped. He said, I came naked from my mother's womb, and I will be naked when I leave. The Lord gave me what I had, and the Lord has taken away. Praise the name of the Lord. So, the reason why I'm reading this scripture is because I found it also relevant in our lives. Sometimes, when problems come into our lives, it is when we are most happy or when we feel that everything is going according to plan. But then the devil then comes and he is in pursuit of taking our lives. And therefore, he tests us, he takes away or he brings events into our lives that will make us turn our faces from God, or that will make us turn our lives to Him. And I feel it was also the same with us when we go through all these challenges. It is at this moment when we need to be worshiping God the most. It is at this moment when we need to realize that it is it is not God who is actually making us suffer, but it is Satan in the pursuit of testing us, testing that are we still going to stick with God, who is our creator, or are we going to turn our lives to Him? Most of the times, we make a very simple decision, which is then to leave God, because we think if God is all powerful, if God is all knowing, why does He allow all these things to happen into our lives? And when we make these choices of turning away from Him, we find that it is at this point that we actually turn away from the grace of God, because God uses situations that we go through in order to be able to manifest Himself in our lives. That is why I say that I feel when we go through all these difficult situations, it is when we are supposed to be worshiping Him the most, when we are supposed to be joyful, and have courage and just maintain uh, the same life that God has given us, even in these situations. And also, when we look at Job chapter 2, this was when Job was being tested for the second time. And when this happened, it, it made me think that often when we also go through these problems, there will be three voices that we can either listen to. And most of the times, we have to listen to one. There will be the voice of the world, there will be the voice of Satan himself, and then there's also the voice of God. And I feel the voice of the world and the voice of Satan himself are louder than the voice of God. Because for us to hear what God is saying to us, we need to be at a place where we can think and listen to what He is saying through the situations that we're going through. But often we make the mistakes of listening to the voice of the world. We make the mistakes of listening to the voice of Satan, since those are the loudest voices. Like referring to Job chapter 2, when Job was sick with the skin eating disease, his wife was said to him that, why doesn't he just curse God and die? But Job replied, saying that, you talk like a foolish woman. Should we accept only good things from the hands of God and never anything bad? So, in all of this, Job said nothing wrong. So, for me, this was like a very powerful event where everything was going bad or everything was going wrong in the life of Job. Even his wife had to tell him that this God that you serve, if He's all powerful, then why are you going through these things? Why don't you just curse Him and die? But what Job did here showed that it is not only in good times that we need to worship God, but it is also in bad times or when we're going through different situations that we need to maintain our worship with God. And it is so relevant in our lives, because when we face all these challenges, think people will say different things to you. When we go look for help from different people, some will say walk away from your problems. Some will say that you need to walk away from, let's say, God. If God loves you and God is powerful, why do you go through these things? But I feel as young people, we need to be careful when it comes to walking away, because we might be walking away from the will of God. And by doing that, reminded me of the story of Jonah, when God had to command the fish to swallow him and bring him back to the will of God. So it is important for us to worship God and pray more when we're going through these situations, because it is only then that we will hear what God is saying to us. And then we won't walk away from the will of God. Because sometimes we think what we're going through is because of what we've done. We ask God, that is it because of what I've done last year or what I've done whenever. But in most cases, it is not because of what we've done. It is because of God's will. It is God's will for us. And there is a reason why I say it is God's will for us. And one of those reasons we find in John chapter 9, verse 3, verse 1 to 3, where we find the story of a blind man, or a man who was born blind. John chapter 9 reads, as Jesus was walking along, he saw a man who had been blind from birth. Rabbi, his disciples asked him, why was this man born blind? Was it because of his own sins or was it because of his parents' sins? And then Jesus replied, it was not because of his sins or his parents' sins. This happened so that the power of God could see in him. We must quickly carry out the tasks assigned us by the one who has sent us. The night is coming, and then no one can work. But while I am here in the world, I am the light of the world. So for me, this was relevant to what I was going to talk about today, because I've heard people asking themselves that what I'm going through, is it because of what I did wrong? Maybe they've made mistakes in the past. They think they're being punished for those mistakes at the moment. But this to me says that it is not because of what you've done in the past, or it is not because of what your parents have done in the past, but this is so that God can be able to manifest himself in you through the situation that you're going through. Maybe what we are going through is what God has purposed for our lives, because how we respond to the situations or the problems that we go through has a lot to do with how we see God. And it is important for us as Christians to be able to respond to these situations in a way that God will be pleased with us. Because in most cases, when we look into this world, we are the only Bible that people read. People can look at you and be able to know which God do you serve. And often, as I said, we're the only Bible that people read. So we can either drive people away from God because of how we respond to these situations, or we can either bring them to God because they'll be wondering, well, how is it that you're going through this situation, but yet you are still standing, yet you are still doing what you need to be doing as God has planned for your life? And just to conclude, um, there is actually no doctor that can heal you. It is only God who can heal. There's no human being that can solve your problems. It is only God who can. No one can give you the strength that you need to go on. It is only God who can. All these people can only help us to a certain point, but they cannot never do what God can. So I just want to encourage us that as we go out there, especially the young people, when we face different challenges, we mustn't be quick to run to the people or to the things that will think hold their solutions to our problems. Because often, like I said, the problems that we are faced with are more of spiritual problems than physical problems. So let us be quick to run to God before we run to people, thinking that they will be able to solve our problems. Yes, God has placed people in our lives to be able to help us to a certain point, but let us not put our trust and our faith and belief in people, because not even the best doctors in the world uh, have the ability to heal you, because doctors only deal or work on assumptions, but God works because he knows exactly where you are. He knows your life. He's the one that made you, and he's the one that knows your ending. I always make an example of a tombstone which is placed on everybody's graveyard when we pass. Yes, that we can know, for example, the date of birth, and we can know the date of death, but the line in between, we do not know. It is God who knows. And what will happen tomorrow, only God knows. And it is only Him who knows. So therefore, we need to run to Him when we are faced with these challenges, because He has everything that we need to go through them. Thank you.